I would like to say thank you very much for all who turned out to my artist talk. I truly appreciate you all coming out to whenever comes. It was for your consumption and it was great socializing and meeting everyone. Thank you.
My first question, Monsieur Romain. We know you hail from Trinidad. Tell us about the trajectory of Toronto, why Toronto, when Toronto, and kind of how you ended up in this city.
Well, that's a very
It's a long story.
long story. But I got married. So
It's a Canadian woman.
yes,
Oh,
I got married to a beautiful Canadian woman, and I found myself here in January of 2021. I got a breath of fresh air, discovered that materials were a lot more easily accessible, and I started practicing. I started painting, and one painting turned to two, two turned to three turned to 40, and then I just was running out of space to put them. So
Is that when you looked us up?
it was closer to the time, and people would come over and they would say, there are a lot of paintings here. There are a lot of paintings in the space, what are you doing? So I realized at a point in time I had a problem showing my work. So I started walking around with my phone and just showing random people in stores, just random people at work, just showing them my work on my phone. And then one day I showed a guy at work, and he said, hey, text me, send me your work. So I sent it to him, and then he sent it to his wife, and his wife said, you should go to band. And then I was like, band? And he was like, yeah, well, how you spell it? She was like, B-A-N-D. So I went online or something. I can't remember how I got the actual information, but I contacted Claudia, and I went to Claudia with my phone. I was like, hey, Claudia, I have these works. And she was like, hey, well, I'll talk to Karen, you'll organize a studio visit. Then you all told me to bring the work, and the rest is history. You all gave me that nice big sheet of rolled canvas, and I realized I was in the right place.
I think you messaged us like 3 days later, and you're like, canvas is done. We're like, what? Well, it was a lot of canvas. He's like, yeah, just done. Like, how do I get more? So we, as you kind of alluded to, are pretty informal in the way people come to us through referrals, through finding us online. But obviously there's, as folks can see, a lot of talent in what you're doing. So I guess the last question I'll ask before we step up and start to walk a bit through is just, and this came up, so for you it may feel like you're repeating. Yesterday we had a conversation at the Mativier Gallery where the season preview happens, and so all three artists that will be showing over the next few months, Khaled's the first of the three, were there. And one of the questions that was asked was, what was the thing that inspired you to paint? Like, what was your motivation? So I don't know if you want to just talk a bit about that before we begin with the first piece.
Well, what motivated me to paint, I would say that I have a huge emotional bank. I will also say that I have a lot of life lessons. I have a lot of education. I'm well educated. And the combination of all these things resonated within me and has basically stained my heart. So, in a good way. So I just transfer all of that information on canvas, whatever has inspired me based on the lessons I've learned.
Because you just alluded to it, I feel like we should tell them how very educated you are. So it's Howard University?
Howard University.
Is that undergrad?
Undergrad.
And what was the program you did at
I have a BBA in finance.
I'm the artist with the finance people. I don't know a lot of those people. Fascinating. And then was the time in the UK?
No, well, I have 2 degrees from Howard, one in finance and one in civil engineering. I have, well, after that period of time, I also studied in the UK for a while, but I did not have the constitution to endure certain behaviors, so I left that prematurely, and I also was very rebellious. So I have probably 89% of a structural engineering master's degree complete. Was just a cheap thesis to complete, right. But I left that prematurely as well.
So that's why I thought I knew it was engineering, but I forgot it was 2 engineers because you can't just have 1 engineering.
Yeah.
2. I love this. Okay, now that we have a sense of overachieving Khalid, let's see where overachieving.
Can I ask a question?
Do you want to? I was gonna let you ask at the end, but let's keep it in.
No, it's about that.
Throw
How much longer would it take for you to finish your thesis?
It's probably a semester, really.
Is that your father-in-law sending you to get? Throw that in there. He's like, you should go get that thesis.
I was just thinking, you're that close. Why not go in and close the door, you know?
It's the Caribbean parents. We all African and Caribbean parents would be like, just go, just in case.
Yeah, you need.
That's why mine are second gen.
Okay, we're gonna go towards the piece that's by Claudia and Natalie. And this piece is called Queen of Hearts.
Yes.
Tell us about Queen of Hearts.
Well, Queen of Hearts is basically, me giving recognition to all the beautiful mothers out there who endure and go to wars for their family, their children, their spouse, their cousins, anyone that they consider dear. And these are the scars that they basically, these are the mother's scars. And for some reason, even though it might look a bit grotesque, they still maintain their beauty. So that's why I call this piece Queen of Hearts.
I'm gonna just go in a bit technical on the way you constructed this, because this piece is linked very closely to the piece that is kind of the feature as you walk in the front door, which has less of a, let's say, warm, loving story behind it. That's about people kind of walking around with a sense of a target on them. Whereas this, as you say, is about kind of a mother's love and the things mothers will do to protect their own. But you layer this, like this feels like you started going almost in one direction and then pivoted to another. So can you talk a bit about the strength of the lines, the strength of the markings, the strength just of it feels almost like you were creating an African mask, and that the mask is then speaking to this idea of the coat of armor that sometimes I think especially Black women carry to protect their own. So they show up, we all, especially Black women, we've either witnessed or been this for children where your mother shows up and it's like, oh, you just need to take cover because there may be no prisoners after this, because they go in. So I don't know if you want to talk a bit about just the representation of the strength and the markings as a representation of that strength of protection.
Well, that is as a result of my process, I guess, because I don't go into a piece of work with an idea. I work and let the idea come to me. So approaching it like that, with that level of faith that I will get through the dark tunnel, because sometimes it feels like you're just on a boat with a lot of water around you and no land in sight. I might start with, as I told you, a pen, and I might just start doing stuff, and then I might add paint, and then I might cover that, and then I might do something else, and then it just starts to form layers and layers and layers, and then it turns, the form that's invisible becomes visible, because the art already exists, because the art is in me, but I'm just making it visible to the world.
Question about this one? Give people a bit of time.
The lines in the eyes. What does that symbolize? That she's crying all the time?
Well, not necessarily
I just thought.
that. It could be that her eye is no longer there, and, and that's just sewn.
Okay.
Right? Or maybe it could be a metaphor in a way where like she probably saw something she didn't really want to see, so she's closing that eye.
Okay.
We want to do different ones just in case.
Well, Warmth in the Winter is basically about being in a new place and, you know, experiencing great generosity, great care, great love from unexpected places or people who probably don't even know you. So it's almost like, you know, an angel is just giving you that love. It's like almost miraculous, you know? So that's where Warmth in the Winters come from.
I don't know about you, but I didn't think this at all when I saw it.
No,
I know.
I told him it's my favorite piece, and the blessing in the shade. They're not twins?
Well, they were created around the same time.
Oh, okay.
Very closely, hence the angelic eyes and the wings. But that's from an Orthodox context. The eyes, right? It just symbolizes the omnipresence of God.
Or the notion of eye as protection for those symbols with the evil eye.
Okay.
Yeah, which is what I think of when I see this. I'm thinking of that the idea of a seer that is there to watch over you.
True. It could be.
And I grew up in a Baptist church, so I probably should be thinking about the omnipresence of God. But I'm deep in the seer metaphor. I don't know.
That's okay.
Yeah, we get in trouble on Sunday.
It's okay, but I mean, at the same point in time, I tell people that like art is magical. Art is also kind of prophetic, and like the artist doesn't have the whole story. The artist is just painting from his perspective, but it's a door and a window for all to consume and walk into and make it their own. So if you see yours seeing eye, and I see the omnipresence of God,
That's fine.
we could both be right.
This is why we love Khalid. Where do we go next? Does anyone have any comments, questions about this one? It's one of my favorite as well. And I usually can't handle a bunch of eyes. Claudia and Natalie will tell you that. But nobody likes too many eyes. Because it feels like things, I don't know if you have art at home. And at one point, I think I was buying art thinking about seeing representations of Black folks, and there were too many figurative pieces, and at one point I was just like, everywhere I looked there was someone watching. And so just I can't do that now. So the overwhelming amount of eyes here may have shifted that motif. But I also think the representation of the towers made me think about you, where you all are living right now, Midtown.
Yeah.
And it feels like this idea of a presence in absence, being in a city and being visible yet being invisible, which is what the towers made me think of.
Honestly, it made me think of my grandmother, and I immediately was like, I'm behaving. I'm gonna be loved, but I'm absolutely behaving because you're watching. Like I got mother, and I got like a full protection mode. Like, you know, you're safe with her. But you know, a pinch in church on Sundays.
Yeah,
Or just a look, because that's all they needed to do, give you a look.
I'll behaved.
But I mean, to tell the truth, you know, the angel with the eyes has no sex. It could be male or female, you know? So I just wanted to just point that out.
And then when you go in the room, the eyes fall.
Oh,
You're still looking?
Very true. I think we're going the other side. Yeah.
This painting is called The Monk and the Mystic. And again, it's just me paying tribute to the individuals that basically helped walk me through certain experiences, and they were always of some spiritual persuasion. So, I mean, at one point in time I wanted to be a monk, so I literally was having long conversations with monks. And then I have very eccentric friends who also have different religions, you know, like, and also too I met like other religious elders, babalaos, people who practice the Ifa tradition, and they too nurtured me. So it's just me bringing them both together, and that's the conversation they're having. And I unite them both. And that's the monk and the mystic.
So one of the things that we've talked about previously is that you're not an artist who researches a particular theme and then creates a body of work or a seminal, like monumental work. But there is, I think, innate to what, even in your explanation of things, there's a curiosity about life and the things that are a part of the human condition. So I don't know if you want to talk a bit about the part of your process where something like this thing is happening around me, but I'm gonna do some more research before. It's almost like, I think you said you research and then you file, and then at some point it pours out of you in the work, but you don't research to make. You research to see where it might lead.
Right. So I live my life, and in living my life, I develop an emotional bank, right? And that emotional bank, I store things that move me. So I might have a particular experience, or I might see the riots in Spain, or I might be privy to the Black Lives Matter movement, or I might have seen my nephew fall down and lost his tooth. Like, these things would resonate, and then I trust my process, and when I paint, I literally, as I said, pour my soul on canvas, and whatever in my subconscious comes out.
What's interesting, and for me, at this stage for you, where all of these different ways the pour results, is if at some point you will pour more in a particular way than another way. Because there's such, and again, anyone standing in this room can see it, there's such distinctions between what this piece looks like and the way you create figures here as opposed to where you're not creating straight figures. And that, just the sense of control, it's like a controlled chaos. Somebody actually came in the day we were finishing, before we opened the show that night, said, it's really chaotic. And we said, yeah, it's partly because it's a survey of a lot of different works, and they said, I think it was a gentleman that said, yeah, but really good, but it's chaotic. It'll be interesting to see where this artist is in 5 years, like how you hone that, and what you choose to control and what you choose to just let be, let go. Comments, questions?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Like, people have experiences or feel emotionally at a time in your life, and then maybe that'll come out in your painting. Do you find you've been gravitating towards certain things now in your life because you get those emotional reactions, whether it's family or?
Well, I think she just said it, Karen just said it, like, that I don't control. I don't pick and choose when it comes to that. I feel, I analyze my environment, I have my judgments, my perspective, and I paint from that space. And it's not about being perfect, it's about being honest. And that's what I try to do.
In an instance, like if your nephew falls down the stairs, do you think at that time, like, oh, maybe I'll want to paint something about this in the future? No,
it's the impact, and if it has an impact. So it's really a lot of subconscious things. It's just what affects me. Like, if I'm really moved by it, if it's I don't want to say if it hurt me, but if I got some overwhelming emotion of if it moved me to tears, or if it moved me to laughter, or if it moved me to celebrate, something, it has to be something that resonates. So
for me, my take on his experience is that it's almost never literal. So it would never be about that moment. Might be about a parent's relationship with their child growing, or memories that kids may have of their growth, which may then result in a schoolyard thing as opposed to the fall from the stairs. But the idea of youth and growth would be the theme. So I feel like your work lets people in because it's much more thematic, and that may go to the education and the way the academy can help us construct things at the 3,000 feet level instead of being granular. And in that way you find a place, you find a way to let others in, because there's various points of entry to everything. So as you said, like someone stands and looks at that piece and they see someone's in pain because they're only focused on the scars. Someone else sees the beauty because they're liking the strong colors. Because we know art history is the whole thing around what color represents as opposed to what a marking may be representing. The range of the way you use colors that seem to be warm and about happiness. And we won't go down the rabbit hole so much with this, but that's a strong example. So many people love that, and then they hear the backstory and they're like,
Can I just ask you about, you say you come from, you allow it to flow through the subconscious, right? So now how do you know it's done? Like it's done. Like this is it.
It feels good.
That's a good question, because as you know, a lot of artists feel like it's never done.
Yeah.
Yes, especially if you don't start with anything definitive in mind, and it's coming from, it emerges from whatever comes through, then.
Yeah, well, it feels good, and then you recognize it. Like you say, okay, that's the story. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's there already, it exists. I'm just taking off the layers or removing the curtain. But there's a process. And the process is like, as I said, you're in a paddle boat in the middle of the ocean, no land in sight, and you're trying to find land. So you're just doing anything possible, and no amount of rowing, nothing. Literally, sometimes a steamship just passes by and picks you up, and you're just like, wow, I found land, So when I recognize where it's coming from, when it's done, and it feels good.
It's like writers who say, I started to write and I didn't know where, which I must tell you, mostly I feel like that's foolishness. How does that work?
It's not.
You're a writer, maybe you can comment on that, but you know what I mean? You're like, how do you know? You too.
Yeah, that's why I asked you the question. It's similar.
Yeah, you recognize it, you see it. You see it, you know it, you know it. Yeah, you know where it came from. Yeah.
You finished the work and then decided to go back in and change something. Like you thought you were finished, but then you experienced something new that now coincide with what you've previously painted, and that painting no longer reflects the full range of the emotions that you thought and just added it.
Right, so that's the next part of the process. She asked the question, how do I know when it's done? But there are times when I know it's not done, but I can't go any further. There's no steamship passing. So I'll take the painting, I'll roll it and throw it under my bed and let it cook. And then later, I'll take it out the oven, roll it again, and then I might be inspired to work on it until it's finished.
Point to this next piece, but then I also would love it for you to talk a bit, because I know you've been experimenting with sculpture to see how that has been impacting the way you come to, because right now we're investigating Khalid, who's the painter, and it's like, we always like to say, at this emerging stage, we're introducing artists to the world, which may change your medium. You may choose to play in a different realm at some point. We know your poetry is included in the show, so you're writing, but maybe you can talk a little bit about how the sculpting is impacting the way you make work. But first, let's hear about
Johari Window.
Johari Window.
Well, Johari Window, I picked that up in a psychology class, and also too, my mother always used to talk about that because she did psychology in school. And it's basically, to summarize it, the way she explained it to me and from what I learned, it's like how you see yourself is not necessarily how people see you, you know? And I felt it was necessary to paint this because a lot of times I believe I'm misunderstood, you know? So that's where I was coming from with this, but contrary to popular belief, I used to play around with 3D stuff before, but mostly with wood. And even Mr. Roderick Turner, Mr. Roderick Turner, who encouraged me to paint in Washington, D.C., he literally used to bring pieces of wood because in the church I belong to, the Orthodox Church, the priest blessed the congregation with a cross, it's called Mascal, and he made crosses for the priests, right? Together with his other works, his other like worldly works. So I would be troubled, and he would bring a piece of wood for me, and I would just gnaw away at that wood. Sometimes, like it would be 6 p.m. and then it's 6 a.m. You know, and I would just be working on it. So I always played around with 3D, and it's from there he was just telling me stuff like, you're an artist, you're an artist, you're an artist. And he said the 3D work will help you with your painting. I never really understood what he meant, but I ended up painting.
First, let me ask, do people know the relationship between Trinidad and Venezuela? Do you know the nature of that corridor's history? So why don't you talk about that first to give context?
Oh, well, there are lots of, how do I put it? Venezuela is very close to Trinidad. You can see Venezuela from Trinidad, and from Venezuela you can see Trinidad. And there's a lot of migration. There was a lot of migration historically. When one country had a lot of resources, Trinidadians used to go over there. When Trinidad became more wealthy, Venezuelans came over. So with that back and forth, Venezuela, you know, a lot of Venezuelans have been coming to Trinidad. TFED is about some of the social issues that occurred as a result of that migration. When we say TFED, you know, we say, you all might say, wow, that blew my mind. Well, we say that stole your brain. You understand? Like, you're confused, you're headless. So we have a situation where if you have Trinidadian women complaining about Venezuelan women taking their husbands, right? So the men are literally headless, right? The flag is literally around, the Venezuelan colors are around his genitalia, and yeah, it's like a land, it's like a, you know, like when they went to the moon. And they put they put a flag there, so they put a flag there, and these men just go crazy for Venezuelan women. So it's a TFED, because some of them even sacrifice their families, you know, to philander.
I think that picture should have been a bigger brain.
Yeah, so that's what TFED is about.
So of course, more recently, the crash, as we know economically, of Venezuela has had Venezuelans migrating. So there would have been a spike in the presence of Venezuelans. And so it's interesting because you just said to me that they found oil in Venezuela again. More oil. So the flip back may occur again. I remember hearing about Trinidadians who spoke Spanish because they had gone and worked and lived. So it was the reason so many Trinidadians were quite fluent in Spanish. So I always thought the wave going the opposite way, which I think is often what happens with us in the Caribbean, is that you see the idea of us leaving Caribbean islands to go out, not necessarily people coming to the islands. I thought it's fun. It's one of my funnest. And I love it.
You know, you explained it and now
No one is.
I know.
I can't unsee it.
Yeah, I'm like, as a Caribbean, I'm like, I get it. This is hilarious.
Oh, God.
So do you want to end on another cheeky note with Flush, or should we talk, or do we have time for both, for Loving Arms and Flush?
Yeah, Flush is basically about all the things that you need to put in the toilet and flush it and then bless it. You know, so there are a lot of things in life you have to just flush down the toilet, say your prayers, and move forward.
Let it go. I know. That's simple. So good. And loving arms?
And loving arms is just the balance that needs to occur in relationships that you value. You know, they must have that balance. If one lover's arms are around the other one's throat, the other one has to balance the energy with having his arms or her arms around the other partner's waist. They can't both be choking each other. So that's what loving arms is about.
Who would have thought the choking? Who? I never.
And sometimes we need to choke.
Even if you start both choking each other, you have to. Someone has to release and go to the love at the waist. Any other questions, comments? Anything that you are really interested in that you're dying to hear about that you think we should talk about that we didn't? We just randomly chose different words from the opening.
Now that I've heard about that one, I want to know about the.
Oh, here,
Yes.
because of the presence of the
Yes.
seer vibe again.
Okay.
Blessings in the shade.
Yeah, well, blessings in the shade is, you know how you all have this jargon where you all say, you know, you're throwing shade. So it's like I'm saying, okay, they're throwing shade and I'm still being blessed, you know. So it's like it's an outpouring of blessings, like a baptism, you know. And I'm just smiling cheekily and it's like, we'll continue throwing shade. Yeah.
I saw a parent bathing a child.
I did. I absolutely did.
Totally. So
Wash.
I don't think that I asked you about this one, or maybe I did. I forgot.
I saw parents I love. So yeah.
There you go. That works too.
But I would like to thank Band.
I do want to say that we are lucky enough to do this programming because of the support of Scotiabank. Their help is, those of you who've known for years, is a result, is the reason we're able to have the property we have at 19 Brock. And please keep in touch if you're interested in volunteering, if you know artists who are also interested in showing their work, or we are a charity, and so, you know, money always matters. These things are able to happen because we've been lucky to have generous support from individual donors, corporate sponsors, as well as the province, or the feds, and the city. Have I forgotten anything, Claudia?
No, I have a question on her request.
Oh,
Khalid could read the title poem.
Oh, sure. So we should add, he doesn't need to read it, you can just say it. So I'm gonna step out of the way and let you close off with whenever comes.
Okay. Whenever comes, we will pen air and dance to heartbeats, sip dew from daybreaks we doubted ever seeing. Whenever comes, I will never doubt ever again, for she came in and stayed, resting in the rest of me. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Natalie. I'm not gonna be late again. Love you all.
Thank you.